That's how I should start the pod every time. Be like, hello, appendages. How are you doing? Tent poles in the crowd. Thank you for keeping my ego intact.
Minions,
so I can live another
tonight.
day and not feel isolated.
We capture the moon.
How to be patient.
Welcome back to How to Be Patient. I know that you have been patiently waiting for another Monday episode, and we have delivered part 3.
Have you been feeling isolated without us, listeners? Probably not.
Did you miss me? That's what I want to know. That's the real question.
You always
It's
got to make
lonely
it a
out
little
there.
weirder than I do.
It's lonely here inside my mind.
Did you know sometimes some of my friends will they'll listen mostly to this podcast, but then sometimes when either I say something weird or you say something weird and they know that I'm going to react, they will pause the audio podcast and go to YouTube just to go to that point to watch it to see the face. They're just like, I get a kick out of it. I'm like, you like to see me struggle.
I don't think I rage bait you.
You
Purposely?
rage bait me.
I said purposely.
You
I know I
rage
rage bait
bait
you.
me.
I bring it up. I precipitate affect. That's why the rage baiting. That's
very, very like
that's
that
something
one
that
therapist we
non-clinicians
watched
do.
a couple weeks ago.
You know, so this is all above board, guys. We don't rage bait on this podcast.
Did you guys notice he's mustacheless now? This is an educational podcast.
Turn on the video if you're on audio and check out my upper lip. It's isolated.
It's isolated.
So, and we're making all these puns because the purpose of today's podcast is to discuss the third concern of man in existential psychotherapy or existentialist
Jason, can we get a
approach,
foghorn there?
which is isolation.
Ow.
So we will be getting into kind of how to define isolation existentially. But before we do that, we're going to start with today's icebreaker, which is all about relationships. So, Margaret, the icebreaker to you is to name a relationship that has done nothing for you.
This podcast. Next.
Bingo. Okay.
No. Preston did text me this like 3 days ago, and I said, I think, quote, girl, what? When you said name a relationship on air that's done nothing for you.
Yeah, this is the rage baiting chat that we've been talking about.
A relationship that has done nothing for me. I'm trying to not give you an annoying answer.
Well, I think it's okay. You can give me an annoying answer because this is an annoying question.
That's true.
And I didn't tell you this over the text, but I was kind of like, I think the purpose of the question is to like be intentionally like frustrating because it's like, well, what do you mean this relationship does nothing for me? Why does it exist if it does nothing for me? You know?
I think that any relationship always does something to and in us. And so the idea of relating to me is like inherently affects you. And so therefore, if I'm in relationship, like the opposite would be like indifference and having no relationship if I was going to have no impact. So I think I'm struggling to come up with one because whether like good or bad, I can't think of someone I was in a relationship with that didn't have any lasting shaping of my like interior landscape at all. Is that an annoying answer? That's me rage baiting you.
Yeah, exactly. Because I asked you a question, you've given a great like Gavin Newsom political style answer.
This is not a political answer. It's my true answer. I would say this to you off air too, and you know that.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe it's impossible to have a relationship that does nothing for you. I think, and we'll get into this later in the podcast, but there are relationships where it's as if one person is equipment and the other person is the user. And I think what I was trying to get at is a relationship where you were the piece of equipment.
Well, what would your answer be to the question?
I think there's like one time in high school where this girl definitely just like wanted to get back at a guy that she liked and was scorned by. And so she like asked me to prom. And I went with her, but I like didn't.
As a feminist.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, when I was there, I was like, "Does this do anything for me?" And I guess it did. Like, I can't say it did nothing for me because I was, like, excited to go to the prom, but I felt like I was equipment, I guess, in that way,
Mm,
because I was there to serve a purpose for her to achieve some social competition or to make someone else jealous,
mm.
I guess. So
And I guess in my, frustrating political answer, the way that I would think about that would be, is it is in relationship, and also that, like, if you're instead of being in the, like, quote unquote I thou relationship where there's two subjects, it's the I it. And so it's kind of like,
mhm.
is that a relationship if you are using someone?
Ah, I see. So that's why you're giving the challenging answer because you've already read Buber
Oh,
and
me and Boober go way back.
she already knows how to define
We
a relationship properly. So let us waste no more time on this icebreaker and let's just get into the loneliness. So to kind of like recap some of the axioms or the fundamental concerns of men, if you sorry, humans,
That's okay.
history and her story,
First
you know what I mean?
Women's History Month right now when we're recording.
So there's the problem of death, that
Right.
we're all inevitably going to die, and we
Classic.
have to come to terms with them, you know? I mean, most of us are gonna die, I won't, obviously, and there's
Right,
gonna
you
be some
shave that
rescuer that
mustache
comes to
off, you're a
save
new
me. Yeah,
man.
it's impossible. The next that was sarcasm, I'm going to die someday, but hopefully not today. The next one is freedom, so that we're all inescapably free and then therefore have to make our own choices, darn it, right? And then the next one is that we're alone, and this is episode 3, we're talking about being alone. So to get more into it, I want to, I guess, let us define 3 main types of loneliness. And obviously, you can categorize this into a million different ways, but this is to kind of help us guide the direction of the conversation. So, the first one would be interpersonal isolation. What comes to mind when I say that to you, Margaret? I'm interpersonally isolated.
I think it would be the kind of, like, usual way people mean when they talk about loneliness, at least in, like, modern Western culture, of
Hmm.
kind of feeling disconnected or not having, like, intimacy emotionally, physically, or otherwise with other people outside of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Your interpersonal isolation, like you said, it's the classic picture of being isolated. You're literally far from your family. So technically, Margaret and I, this is a virtual podcast. We're in different time zones. We are interpersonally isolated, though we can assuage some of that interpersonal isolation by communicating through our fancy technologies. But interpersonal isolation doesn't just have to be geographically, it can also be like via language or culture. So, if I was alone in a foreign city where I don't speak any of the language, even though I'm around a bunch of people, I don't have a way of necessarily relating to them. That can be a very interpersonally isolating experience.
Yeah.
So this we're familiar with the effects of interpersonal isolation. I think we've talked about the interpersonal theory of suicide before, that like
Yeah, that's what reminded
isolation.
me of the, like, feeling like when like, the part of the one of the writings that we talked about with, like, the theory of suicide was, like, that sense of being, like, anonymous or, like, being totally disconnected and unknown and walking in a city and knowing no one and being totally disconnected, which is this picture that you're describing for this first one.
Precisely. It's that picture, and that kind of starts the train of, isolation, perceived burdensomeness, or like thwarted belongingness, which goes in line with interpersonal isolation, and then, um, increased capability for suicide and X, Y, and Z. So this isn't a podcast about the dangers of interpersonal isolation, but it's important to acknowledge that. The next one would be intrapersonal isolation, which is we're getting a little more abstract now. So what comes to mind when I say that one?
I think usually I would think intra meaning, like, within the thing itself. So within the person, a sense of loneliness or disconnection from the self, but I don't know if that's what it
Hmm.
means here.
Yeah, no, isn't understanding English great? like,
We love
like
root words here.
yeah, and I didn't even prime Margaret on this earlier. Yeah, so you're describing it exactly
Usually
right.
he's feeding
It's
me my lines.
the
There's
teleprompter
there's
is
another
just
video over here that's just him
rolling
texting
off.
me like, "No, stop saying that."
No, do it again in a British accent. The intrapersonal
Laugh
isolation
harder.
is isolation of yourself from some other part of yourself. So like how in interpersonal isolation, you are separated from other people. It's that the pillars of yourself are blocked off from each other, which sounds really abstract, but it makes more sense when you get into psychopathology. So people can have isolation of affect. They don't have access to their affect. They don't have access to their emotions. They're not aware of their desires. You ever have a patient come into therapy and say, I don't know what I should do. I don't know what I should want. I don't know what I should feel. Those are all perfect examples of intrapersonal isolation.
Yeah. I think also like you could think of some dissociation here as well of like
Absolutely.
just not just the like one form of it would be not knowing and having no access to it, but I think even just like the incongruence, which we always, mark on the mental status exam, but like a true incongruence where someone can know that in theory they're feeling a lot of grief or trauma and they're like laughing or they're like dissociated and distant and kind of hovering outside of themselves so that they can know what's there. As another form of this could be knowing what's there, but still being like unable to put the pieces together and feel them integrate together.
Yeah, I love that description. Yeah, putting the pieces together. And I think that's kind of how I picture it too, is that there's fragmented parts of yourself. And in a way, it's the job of the therapist and the patient to work together to kind of mend those fragments and make it a whole again. Like the purpose of therapy, you could argue, is to return someone to a congruent state of being.
Now you're talking like an analyst. Be careful.
I know. Slowly but surely, I'm becoming an analyst.
Slowly. Yeah.
Darn it! The thing I swore to destroy is actually like taking over my life.
Like Luke, I am your father.
Yeah, no, really. So and we see this with a lot of therapies already. So like manualized therapies like CBT really focus on like helping people return to their congruence because they have incongruence between their feelings, their thoughts, and their behaviors. And the same with psychodynamic therapy, where there's like maybe an isolation from your true motives that are hidden somewhere deep in your childhood that you can help uncover to the patient and then like return them to their congruence. So that's a target of a lot of different therapy relationships, but it's also a little bit different than existential isolation. So we've kind of established the first two. Existential isolation is, as Irvin Yalom describes it, the deep-seated discomfort with the knowledge that you are ultimately alone in the universe. And this can be very intimately related to intrapersonal isolation, also related to interpersonal isolation, maybe exacerbated by the two other phenomenon, but it's a separate and distinct phenomenon that we are ever presently dealing with and always uncomfortable by, because you at all times are living with yourself every moment that you're awake, and therefore is the reminder of the loneliness or the isolation you have. And I shouldn't actually use these interchangeably because they are different. Isolation is not necessarily loneliness. Loneliness is the unmet need or unmet desire for connection, where isolation is solitude, which doesn't necessarily have that same unmet need.
That's a really good point. I think one of the places, and I agree with you, like that this is kind of what the existentialist would say. I think one of the reasons I don't identify as an existentialist therapist, and maybe I just haven't read enough of like modern existentialists, is that to me, in some ways, similar to like religious arguments or other philosophical arguments, which is where we are right now with this. I don't think it's unreasonable to make the statement that we are fundamentally alone and you always, wherever you go, there you are. Like everyone says this in different ways, right? That you cannot escape the self. And I think there are many philosophies that would view how you kind of draw the boundaries up around the self very differently. What? Why are you? What?
I'm smiling because you are predicting these great segues.
Oh, I'm
already.
sorry.
So,
I'm sorry.
when we come back from this break, there's no need to apologize, Margaret. We will get into how we conquer these fears of isolation, if it means mending or massaging the boundaries of the ego, and where it can go wrong and where it can go right. So just after these messages.
Sometimes emotion regulation looks like sensory comfort. And for all of my sensory comforts, I, like Preston is showing on the video right now, use Cozy Earth blankets, comforters, and socks. What do you use to comfort yourself, Preston?
I mean, I would show you the socks that I'm wearing, but I'm too comfy under this Cozy Earth cuddle blanket to get up. I'm actually not sure if I'll ever get up again. I might just live here.
Well, we'll talk about that later. But what you can trust is that there's a 100 sleep guarantee to be able to return any products that aren't fitting with you, but we think you probably won't make many returns. And there's a 10-year guarantee.
So use our code PATIENT at cozyearth.com and make sure you include us in the post-purchase survey because we did send you.
And in the meantime, we wish you a lot of emotion regulation. You're going to need it for the rest of this episode.
Or at least a blanket. So Margaret teased very well that a lot of isolation comes from how you define or draw the lines of the self. And that can be one solution. I think what I want to get back to is initially at least, the existentialist framework of isolation, which is that you have this thing kind of sitting in the back of your head. I think almost like a hole that's just burning in you at all times. And you have to find a way to cover it. And if you're not addressing it, it's just hurting in you. And this is different than some of the other existential problems. In a lot of the defense mechanisms we have are denial based for things like death or for freedom. But there are times where you can delude yourself into thinking you're not making a choice. And you're like, I don't have to decide right now. I can do something else. Don't feel like I'm deciding. Or death is so far along away that to me, it's like it doesn't exist. But loneliness, that's always there unless you're directly like addressing it. Anytime you're alone in a hallway or driving alone in a car, like it's a reminder that you really are alone in this world. So the ways that humans can conquer this burning hole in their side is through relationships and through redefining the self. That's just what we are driven to do as humans. It's not psychopathologic to pursue a relationship. That's
yeah. In the same way, it's
I
not
want to say like that's a healthy
to
human
like
thing.
Eat a hamburger when you're hungry. Like it's
right.
This is probably an evolutionarily healthy desire or function,
Yes.
at least genetically speaking.
Yeah. Genetically speaking, philosophically speaking, romantically speaking, like the drive to seek a relationship is like a fundamental human need, like eating, drinking, breathing. It's really the psychopathology comes out in how we pursue those relationships. And so I guess to start out with, we should probably define the ideal healthy relationship. And Margaret kind of mentioned this earlier, which is the I vow relationship. So to take a step back, Uber,
I vow relationship,
super smart dude, he kind of defined two main types of relationship. There's the I thou relationship, or I you, sometimes it's translated to, and there's the I it relationship. Margaret, how would you differentiate between those two types of relationships? It seems like you're familiar with your boy Boober, and you all go way back.
I took like a philosophy of love, the fiction of love, and a theology of love class in college. So we're like, me and him are divas together. I mean, I think what we talked about at the beginning, right? The sense of like one, like being used is you're probably the it in the I it relationship at that point. I think one of the ways that one of my professors used to talk about it was this fundamental idea that the other person, it's sort of like the Rilke quote we had in that episode a long time ago, is fundamentally always going to be a mystery to you. And some would call it a mystery and a gift. And that I thou, if you're both subjects, then you're kind of equal in the power and playing field and equally unknowable to each other while still reaching across and trying to make contact. Whereas it would be kind of the like conquering, using, not seeing in one's mind, viewing yourself as a subject and like the other person sort of as just like a moon that revolves around you.
Yeah.
How would you define it though?
I like the moon analogy. I like the piece of equipment analogy. I'm actually going to use Aristotle's, one of his frameworks for friendships, to kind of like split it for me, because he talks a lot about like similar concepts. So Aristotle describes three types of friendships. There's friendships of utility, there's friendships of pleasure, and there's friendships of virtue. So friendship of utility is a relationship that is based on like mutual need or support. Friendships of pleasure are, I think, self-explanatory relationships where both parties derive some sort of mutual pleasure out of it, whether it's, drinking together, laughing together, having fun together, having sex. Like those are all like relationships of pleasure. And the first two I described are relationships that are a means to an end.
Mhm.
I need food, so I work with you to gather stuff. I need a ride to work, so we carpool. That's a friendship of utility, but I'm ultimately using you as a ride. You are a means to an end. So those first two are the I-it type relationship.
Mhm.
The friendship of virtue is an end unto itself. You're friends with them because of who they are. And that's the I-you relationship. So one thing that I think is also important about like the I-you relationship is that you are both individuals in this relationship, which means you have to reveal every part of yourself in the same way. So you can't disclose only like a little bit of yourself and expect it to be an I-you relationship where you are showing all that you are while also attempting to see the other person earnestly and honestly. If you're like kind of hiding those parts of yourself, then that kind of reduces things to the I-it relationship.
Mhm.
And that can be like a very hard challenge to conquer for someone who's trying to get over their sense of isolation and truly relate to other human beings. And the core of that, and I guess flipping
Wait,
it on
wait,
its
wait, wait,
head,
wait, 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 wait. Why do you say I don't disagree with you, but can you like draw the connection
yeah,
for me that it's hard for someone who's lonely to overcome that? I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I'm wondering where your
yeah.
brain connected that.
So there's an irony to this, and in the book Existential Psychotherapy, they describe it as the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, which is that if you have such a need to overcome loneliness, your your yearning for connection starts to turn those relationships into a means to an end to assuage that yearning for connection. And then it almost like blockades you from being totally vulnerable and being totally needless with them. Because then it's almost like it reduces all of your friendships to a friendship of utility because I'm just using you to not feel lonely. And I can't see you for all that you are because you have become equipment to me because I'm just so afraid and frazzled and I just want to not be alone.
And I like you being a thou threatens me because like what I'm using you for is so tenuous and I'm so like uncertain and insecure in it that I need you to be in this like box so that I can like fit it into the into the slot that says like now I have friend or now I'm not lonely or this pain of loneliness won't come back.
Yeah. And it sounds like what we're describing is really abstract to maybe some of you listeners. So I'm going to try to kind of bring this into a simple, like, pool analogy. So let's say both Margaret and I are in the pool and we can both tread water. It's a lot easier for us to have fun in the pool where we're treading water and talking to each other. And, maybe we put our hands together and, kind of like make a little teepee for it or something, or we can like play with the pool noodles. But like we can be friends in the pool because we're both knowing how to function there. But if Margaret doesn't know how to swim, no, actually, sorry, Margaret's an expert swimmer. If I don't know
I'm
how to
not. I'm
swim,
not. You can make me not know. I be
so
holding my nose as I
Margaret's
jump in.
she's drowning, she's flailing, you know what I mean? And I'm like, "Oh, Margaret, you wanna have fun in the pool?" And I swim over to you, and you're immediately like, "Oh, thank God." And then you just jump on me and start, like, pushing me down, but you're not trying to push me down, you're just trying to get above water. Like, how can we have a good back and forth, jolly old time in the pool when you're just using me to not drown the whole time? You're like a buoy, thank God. And you're probably in the pool drowning, be like, "Anybody, somebody, a sense of connection, that's all I need, that's all I want."
Right. How can he expect me to not use him when I'm drowning here in this pool?
Mhm. So, like, that's the irony of it is that the person who needs most to learn how to swim and be friends with people is, like, the person who's least equipped to do that.
This reminds me, I know we're not talking about this right now, but it reminds me of like exposure therapy episodes we've done and like some of the things you can run into with that, especially if someone has like social anxiety, where there's like a mythology that their anxiety builds up from their experience of feeling really anxious and therefore avoidant, and then like ruminating around any social things that happen, that like the solution for this existential question through CBT or exposure is like spamming somewhat like low to moderately distressing, like
Yeah.
to use the metaphor, like kicking your feet in the pool with like a kickboard or whatever. And so it's just interesting to think how like this existential question also, like, we go into the granularity of like clinic next week, and like it's like, this is how we're going to work on this existential question through the lens of CBT.
Yeah, exactly. And like we're just spamming kickboarding so that when you doggy paddle a little bit, you maybe have a chance to like play with somebody else in the pool.
Exactly.
You might not be as strong as a swimmer, but like, by God, you're not flailing, you know?
No one drowned. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, what we're talking about is a way to achieve what was in essence a needless relationship where I don't need anything from that person, and therefore I can be vulnerable with them and they can be vulnerable with me. But when you have these need-based relationships, we see them kind of come out into a couple different flavors. And this doesn't perfectly map, but the way I organized it, I put it in line with people with our categories of interpersonal dysfunction. So the personality disorders ultimately. So the first one is where you are hoping to avoid isolation. So you essentially surrender your ego and your sense of self and you try to stick it onto somebody else.
Hmm.
You know, if I'm afraid of
Like
drowning,
dependent personality.
right, I'll just hop on someone's back. I'll let them swallow me. And that's kind of like the type C or like dependent organization. So um, they see themselves as whole, or you can delude yourself into thinking you're not isolated as long as you have someone else to overpower you, make decisions for you, like give you the direction, give you where you are. And I guess you could see like theories about this almost in like the way people engage with like sadomasochistic like sexual fantasies, the idea that like someone has like tied you up and they have full control over you in almost like a BDSM
Yeah.
setting. It's like that probably is, or you could argue is so cathartic to that person because that's like that confirmation that they are not isolated because like they have completely surrendered their ego and they're now like, you know, someone's slave or something, at least in this like relationship dynamic. So it's kind of like one way to look at it. The next one would be where you swallow others. So that's basically weaponizing or like an extreme version of like the I-it relationship where, you know, I'm in charge of this other person. They're all
As they say, the
adoring me.
narcissistic appendage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or even like a histrionic appendage too. Like these are all my fans, or these are all like people that adore me or look up to me. Like they are a means to supporting my ego, but ultimately
They
they're
need me to
tent
start a
poles.
podcast.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They need me to be in their ears every Monday morning at 5:30.
That's how I should start the pod every time. You're like, hello, appendages. How are you doing? Tent poles in the crowd. Thank you for keeping my ego intact.
Minions,
if I can live another
tonight.
day and not feel isolated.
We capture the moon.
That's
The
really
moon is my
good.
fragile sense of self. Okay, sorry, I
Moon's like I
interrupted
didn't sign up for this. No, it's good. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So yeah, you can swallow others and
Ultimately, it's
dominate
always
them.
about minions on this podcast.
Right. Yeah, this is the Dommy Mommy in that sense. And then the last one is essentially almost like the delusional rejection of the need for interpersonal engagement. So this would be like the cluster A ones.
Gang,
So
gang.
it's like,
Let me avoid
I
it.
don't actually
What's up? What's up?
don't actually need it after all. I'm just gonna stick my head in the
I'm
sand,
actually
and I never
good.
need to relate to someone anyways. Yeah.
Never needed that.
And then I guess parallel to all of those, there are ways that we can, not necessarily in a one-to-one sense, but in a one-to-all sense, dissolve the boundaries of our ego and then kind of calm that anxiety around isolation. And this could be in something like joining the military.
Hey.
So
Eagle sound. Accurate eagle noise here. Accurate eagle.
Yeah. What is like
We've
it's a lot
grown
softer than
as a
that Red
podcast.
Hawk sound. Yeah, so if you go from instead of I to we, that's a great way to make you feel better about this like painful isolation that you're experiencing. And the military does a great job of that. You literally you shave your head the second you show up. You get rid of all your civilian clothes. Like it's a environment that's designed to purposely break down your ego so it can be rebuilt as a unit. And that for a lot of people is it's a healing experience for this like piece of existential dread. Um, and it's even outside of like military environments, there's no denying that I think we are, at least artistically as a culture, are fascinated by scenarios where humans have melted away a little bit of their ego and act
Cults.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, cults
Or
are
like
fascinating
mob
to us.
mentality.
I was even just gonna say hip hop dance too.
Oh.
You know, like you see 12 people go out on stage and they all look like individuals, but then they dance in sync. That like their ability to unify as one is like awe-inspiring and fascinating to us. Like we like themes of individuals coming together and being we.
Yeah.
That like
So
flash
like a
mob.
symphony.
Yeah, like a symphony. Exactly. So obviously and these aren't pathologic necessarily, but it lives on a spectrum, right? Where you have to learn how to balance this dialectic of the I within the we.
I like that.
Yeah, I know. They're everywhere, right? Like
Gang,
how do you
gang.
it's like I am an individual, but I'm also part of a group. And so when you let yourself become completely swallowed by the group, that can be dangerous. Or when you completely resist and never become a part of the group, that's also dangerous. So
Yeah. See, this is where I feel like the history of psychology and psychotherapy and psychiatry is hindered by our lack of inclusion of other cultures from other parts of the world, or it's just not as broad as it could be. Because like I'm going to probably say this word wrong, but there is a word that I came across a number of years ago. I'm trying to make sure I'm getting this right.
so let me tell you about my high school's motto while you search that up. It was called Ubuntu.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Cooter High
Okay.
School, shout out Ubuntu. It means I am because we are.
Like, no, literally, dead ass.
That was like our whole thing.
I'm literally writing Ubuntu and it keeps coming up with like, oh, it's a web server type of coding. And I'm like,
Oh,
no.
yeah, Linux. Yeah. It's like the tech bros took it over. Stop
Like,
it,
no,
guys.
stop taking good things.
The
Yeah, but
technocrats,
I've heard
no.
it like translated as I am me because we are us,
Mhm.
which is like beautiful. And like also like in Catholic theology and Christian theology too, and many other places, but like in Catholic theology, the common one we use um, is this like idea of like Christ is the head, but then all of us are like within one body, and like someone's an eyeball, I don't know if it has to get this like concrete, but like someone's like the left pinky toe, someone's, whatever. And then there's value in all of these different pieces coming together, and actually the wholeness, in this case in the divinity, but also just in general, is through the all of us dissolving the selfhood, kind of like you're saying, which you haven't mentioned religion because I yell at you when you do, but I'll mention religion as another way that we think about this.
No, and I think that's a great point. And I haven't mentioned religion in the prior episodes, but religion has a lot of great answers to these existential problems. And ultimately, some could say that like religions are invented to answer the existential problems. So like they do a good job of like giving people solace.
And for those who are religious who listen, they also could be existential problems, and maybe your religion does have the answer and didn't invent them. So just putting that
Yeah,
out there as,
sure.
not just opioid for the masses, as Marx called it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all just depends on where your faith lies.
Mhm.
I was going to say it reminded me a little bit of Attack on Titan when
What's
everyone's
that?
like a part of, oh, it's an anime. so so basically, these are all
Why do men always
spoilers.
try to get me to watch anime?
If you want to watch Attack on Titan, speed up right now. But basically, all of the Titans are related from the same like birth mother Ymir. And so there's like all the descendants live on the island together. And I was like, oh, like I am because we are, but they're all descendant of the same Titan, you know,
Okay.
through like Mother Ymir. It's pretty interesting. It's it's Ubuntu. Really, Attack on Titan is
I
Ubuntu.
can't believe that was your high school's motto.
Yeah. And our whole thing was like an Impala too. So I guess like Africa related, African adjacent. Yeah. Booter High School. Good work, guys. Okay, so we are going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we'll stop talking about all the ways isolation goes wrong and start talking about how we can actually help people overcome isolation.
Love when we do that.
Can anything be done? Find out after these messages. Boo-doo-doo-doo-boo-doo.
We know that a lot of people who listen to our podcast are also therapists and maybe running their own practices. And as someone who is brand new to the game of opening my own private practice, Simple Practice has been a really, really important tool for me.
Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR that is HIPAA compliant, HITRUST certified, and built specifically for therapists. It brings scheduling, billing, insurance, and client communications into one place, so you're not juggling multiple systems to run your practice.
And one of the features that I'm really excited for that can help with the business side of things is automated reminders for your patients to help reduce no-shows, as well as other components of billing and insurance to make the business side a little bit less of a heavy lift.
And if you're just starting out or growing your practice, there's also a credentialing service that can take the headache out of insurance enrollment, which can honestly be a huge lift. So if you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now's the perfect time to try Simple Practice.
Do it with us.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com. So, one of the first ways to bring someone into a healthy relationship is to identify the ways in which they're not fully engaging. And that's kind of like our job as a therapist, is say like, what's like holding this person back from engaging? And a great trick from the book was actually to ask the question, how many people are in the room right now? And we can take it a little more abstractly, obviously, because it's like, okay, there's 2 people in the room, or here there's 1 person in the room. But like if you're in group therapy, for example, like Dr. Yalom uses like a couple anecdotes where there's a patient speaking in a group therapy, and he would ask himself, how many people are in the room? And it really only ever felt like there was like 1 person in the room with like when one of the patients, like Meredith, for example, was speaking. And so then he would like reflect that back to the patient. Hey, if only it feels like you're the only person in the room when you talk. You know, like you don't engage us, but like you use us as an audience in some way. And if you are doing things that take away from your ability to be present while you're talking with someone, like maybe only thinking about the answer that you're going to have, or if you're going to say something funny or say something smart, like you're not being present with that person and addressing them. And I actually wanted to bring this up because it's something that I feel like I've struggled a little bit in podcasting. I think that when we try to kind of bounce off each other as a host, I am thinking about all the people that might be listening to this. I'm thinking about, the producers that are listening, how it might be perceived, how you might perceive me. But then that takes all the people out of the room where it's really supposed to be a relationship between you and I. And it keeps me from authentically interacting with you. So I was actually reflecting on this a lot. I was like, sometimes when I'm on this podcast, it's like, I'm the only person in the room, and that prevents me from achieving this goal of having an I-thou relationship with Margaret. So it's useful.
First of all, I want to appreciate that, like, you just said something quite vulnerable, which is really hard to do. It makes me curious what it felt like when you were the person, like when you had the solo episode, which is a little bit different in terms of the dynamics. It sounds like I know you've been reading about existentialism and reflecting on this for like weeks to months at least now in terms of for this podcast. But I do wonder, like, when you did the podcast and it was like you as the main person guiding the conversation, did it feel like you were more present or less present or the same? Was there any difference in the dynamics there?
I think it was both and. I think there were ways that I was more present and less present. I think I thought less about the next answer that I was going to give, which it's not my intention. Like, I think a lot of this comes from insecurity, right? I'm trying to put on what I think is a good podcast. I don't have this perfect comfortability being conversational, which I think is natural for anyone who's like getting into the entertainment space and are learning a new medium. And I guess I've been doing this for about a year, but it's almost impossible not to think about how other people might be perceiving you. And that leads you to imagine them in the room rather than being present with that person. So
Mhm.
where sometimes in our more structured episodes, I'm already thinking about like where do I want this episode to go, and that takes away like because for the audience who's listening, we actually have like outlines or run of shows that we try to do and try to follow them, and sometimes we go off the beaten path in one way or another, and one person's having fun going on an anecdote, and the other person's like, "Oh, I need to guide the show to where I want it to go," and like so it's like self-induced stress because
Last week.
you guys don't actually know where the show's supposed to go, but we're like freaking out internally, and then it takes away from the amount of people that are in the room, I guess, for the purpose of this episode. So with like the Amin episode, I don't think I had as much structure for it, so it was easier not to focus about that. But then I think I was almost imagining you like looking out on the episode because it was like me running solo, and I'm wondering what would Margaret think about like how I'm representing the show right now.
Hmm.
So like those things like took away from it, and not that like I didn't have the utmost intention to be present, but like any one of those things that kind of fill in and become that other person in the room takes away from the two people in the room there. So yeah, I was like more present in some ways and less present in other ways.
I mean, we'll get back into the topic, but one, I just appreciate you sharing this. I also think, I mean, I don't know, listeners, you can tell us, but showing up, and one of the things I appreciate about the last episode, or maybe I guess it was 2 episodes now, when you were talking with Amin, was like talking about the showing up concretely and what happens with it on social media. And then the thing that you and I have talked about, I think maybe on the Patreon probably before, but like also off screen, is I think I have this view of you as similar to like Will or Dr. Glockenflecken, one of our producers, as you guys know, as like you do this, you face the camera and you talk to the camera and you do this. And so I think even though I know that this is not how it works, I think from the beginning, I've always expected you to find it easier than me. But I think because you're used to being in front of the camera and talking to the camera, you have like really high, good standards for yourself, but also it can make it feel like really high stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate your effort in pushing through them and reflecting on them.
Oh, thank you. And those stakes make it harder to they become barriers in and of themselves. It's like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Um, like same thing in figure skating. You know, Alyssa
The
Liu.
exact same thing.
It's the exact same. Podcasting is like figure skating. Alyssa Liu isn't putting all this pressure on herself. That's why she's out there repping Oakland, spinning to gold. Where the other skaters, they're cracking under the pressure, and then you need to be relaxed to put on. I've heard. I'm not a figure skater,
Patreon
but I've heard if
episode.
you relax and you have fun, you put up a better program.
I'm connected to everything and I'm attached to nothing, as she says.
Yep, I think it's beautiful. So that's
Okay, we
so
haven't solved loneliness yet, though.
we did a little bit. So and we got at some of it, which is first identify how many people are in the room, figure out the ways in which someone's holding back and being less vulnerable. When someone finally does open up, Margaret actually did what you're supposed. Not that you're supposed to do anything, but you ask horizontally revealing questions rather than vertically revealing questions, or you ask for horizontal disclosure, not vertical disclosure. So to kind of key you in, a horizontal disclosure is to be meta about the disclosure itself and say, hey, I think that was really hard for you to disclose. What are other times when it's been hard for you to disclose or engage with this? Which seemed like this offbeat anecdote, but that's exactly what Margaret did, which was pause, take a second to acknowledge that Preston was disclosing this thing, and then talk about its relationship in another context. Whereas I guess the therapeutic mistake in that context would be for Margaret to try to like push deeper and say like, tell me more about how it's really hard for you to be present with me. And like, what are other things that are like barriers to this? Because me going down and like revealing kind of some of like the vulnerable innards, like that's already like a hard carve. So it's like, you don't want to immediately push deeper into the bullet hole. You just kind of want to ask about what it was like revealing that to you. So like that's like I think a good first practice when you do identify that the patient is speaking to less than 2 people in the room, and they say something profound. Just call out that disclosure and kind of beat around it in that way. That will help like create the more authentic relationship.
Guys, I didn't prepare for this episode. You're leading the horse to water. Then this year of the horse, you're
Dude,
prompting. We're on the same page today.
yeah. It's just Margaret's just a good therapist. I think that's all we're learning
Don't say that.
on the pod.
You know I don't like compliments. Don't say that.
And the next one, this is going to sound so lame, but it's just modeling a healthy relationship with your patient. You don't need to be encouraging them to be vulnerable. You don't need to be digging into all this stuff, but you need to just show that you're being authentic. So here's where it really sucks, and the fact that you as a therapist need to be going to therapy because like you have to be able to present your whole self to the patient during that session if you're trying to model for them a full, needless, healthy relationship. Obviously, that's never going to be totally true because there's a couple elephants in the room, one of those being that you're being paid to be there. Like that can't not be acknowledged or ignored. Also, that like you have a set period of time. What you can do is say, for those 50 minutes in this session, you have my utmost attention, you're my utmost priority, and I am like modeling for you right now a healthy relationship.
Yeah, the kind of corrective experience of relationship.
Absolutely. And the strongest actually evidence we have in psychotherapy, you can correct me if I'm off base on this, is around the psychotherapeutic relationship. So almost no matter what modality you use, whether it's CBT or DBT or anything else, if you have a positive relationship, a good rapport with the patient, they have better outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it folds well into our episode, which is essentially saying if you have a good relationship with the patient, you are treating their isolation, and patients who have successfully treated isolation are going to get better. Like, I guess that's how I was like viewing it as I was like prepping this chapter.
Well, and I think to the point of it, right? Like many people who are isolated, or who struggle with relationships, and like for our listeners, like I think that running into like feelings of loneliness or isolation happens to everyone at different points in life. Like in and of itself, it's not necessarily a pathology, because I do think that there can be a modern like phobia of loneliness that is like like more of a phobia of like solitude with your own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but often people who are struggling to make connections have had these emotional experiences, or they've had like a drought of emotional experiences where connection was safe, it was warm, it was reciprocal, they weren't being used, there was attunement, and there was like healthy repair and disclosure. And so the therapy, when it works well, is like the therapist showing up every week, being kind of glad to see you, which I know we're going to talk about the humanistic approach, which is one of my favorites, but glad
Mm-hmm.
to see you, curious about what's happening, creative about how to be helpful. Like that repeated week after week after week. Like it makes sense to me that that therapeutic alliance is the thing across therapies that seems to be a huge part in predicting whether the therapy is going to help and last. And it's because it shows you like a relationship that doesn't have maybe all the shit that the other relationship someone's been through has had.
Absolutely. You're going to see a therapist that has unconditional positive regard for you and is showing you like a needless interaction. I want to say intercourse, but like you're not literally having intercourse. It's just like a discourse between two people.
Yeah. I mean, I think also though, like long-term therapy, like it is needless in that it's like very much obviously, as you were saying, like professionally, pay-wise, power structure-wise, it's focused on serving the person in front of you. But in long-term therapy, eventually like a need of the therapist is also there. So like if you like went on maternity leave as a therapist, like that is the need of the therapist and some of the humanity of the therapist coming into the room and then negotiating. I think that's actually a huge part of also the like helpful part is when there's imperfections, not crimes, but imperfections on the part of the therapist or inability to meet needs, right? Because I mean, we've all had experiences as like therapists or clinicians where we can't meet a need for whatever reason. And then the ending of the therapeutic relationship as also part of this corrective experience around loneliness and what it means to be close to another person and known, even if it doesn't last forever or if there's like rupture or the needs aren't met. Um,
Mhm.
I just think that like a lot of times in like dynamic therapy, we talk about like we're really like in business, like we're really doing work when like the client kind of gets mad at you or gets like sad about something and speaks up and says, "Hey, I didn't like that." Um, Not every client will present the same way, but like that rupture and repair is also part of like the loneliness problem because people are lonely also if every time a relationship starts to have depth or has conflict, they like think the relationship is over and they are
Mhm.
doomed to be isolated and alone fundamentally for the rest of their life.
Yeah, like, modeling a healthy relationship also means navigating conflict with someone.
Mhm.
It's so important. And we will get into the humanistic stuff in a second. The last kind of part I wanted to add to this is that there's, like, the secret sauce or secret spice, which is almost like the ineffable portion. Irvin Yalom describes this as, like, what makes your grandma's Armenian soup recipe so good. That you could follow the cookbook perfectly, but you're not gonna make it the way grandma does because she adds just, like, the herbs in the right way and does the little small nuances, and these are things that are hard to capture and replicate that even if she tried to tell you every exact way to do it, she couldn't.
I'm thinking of
He argues,
Ratatouille.
like yeah, I literally watched Ratatouille last night.
We are like this.
Ling So, yeah, so instead of going linguine, you can just try your best to cook because as Gusteau would say, anyone can cook, but it takes someone who's fearless to be great. And that's what you can do in therapy, which is find those moments to be fearless with your patients. There's an interesting, and I'm not saying be unprofessional, but there's an interesting book called like Clinical Excerpts and like Breakthroughs that they talk about in existential psychotherapy, which is saying that it really describes all these individual cases where patients had those like epiphanies or breakthrough moments, or there was like some large progression in therapy. And a lot of them will come from times when like the therapist kind of breaks down and like gets frustrated or exasperated. They show parts of their humanness. And like there was one scenario in there where the patient had a narcissistic organization. They would come in and they would just rag on the therapist
Mhm.
like day after day about how like you're probably not going to help me anyways because you didn't go to a good enough school and you're probably too stupid to even figure out what's wrong with me and I'm too complicated and all this stuff. And then one day the therapist just slams his fist and says like, "Will you stop ragging on me? Come on. Like, are we going to talk about why you can't connect to anyone or figure out your own issues? Or are you just going to insult me all day because I'm having a terrible day?" And like him yelling at the patient like this gets quiet. And then the patient like has this moment of like, "Oh my God." Like that's what it took for him to have that epiphany. And in a weird way, like you could say, oh, like the part of me is like, oh, you shouldn't be like negative and yell at the patient, do all these other things. But the second that therapist like slammed their fists on the table and like was vulnerable, they truly entered the I thou relationship with the patient and showed their full vulnerability and were present with them. And you could argue like that moment, that like spark was enough to help like break the ice for that like sense of isolation. So like that
First of all, great acting that out as the therapist. Second of all, there's this paper called The Theory of the Crunch by Paul Russell. Um, that is kind of what you're describing, like giving it a fun name too. Of like this paper starts with there's one psychiatric condition which presents the appearances of repetitive crises. The life of the individual appears to be chaotic and crisis strewn. Relationships are endangered almost as an everyday event. The psychiatric name for this condition is borderline personality disorder. Again, it doesn't have to be this all the time. I propose the exploration of the emotional crises and the way it becomes woven into the individual's repertoire of repetition by consideration here. And it's just the one of the ways we talked about this paper in my like analyst fellowship thing was like exactly what you're saying, where it's like you come in and eventually the whole world is in the room, like the whole of life and all their parents and everyone and whatever, and you're stomach ache that day as the therapist. And the thing happens again and again and again if we really get into the therapy. Like, this is the core of dynamic therapy, is that the thing happening outside eventually comes in. And eventually it happens so much. And then there's this like true moment of meeting. And that true moment doesn't make it so it's like, and now everything's solved and we had the insight and epiphany and now all these patterns are fixed. But like it is like the breakthrough moment, like you're saying from this, of the like, it doesn't always look like, okay, well, what is it? But it often looks like something like that, where there's like two real people in the room, still boundaried, but like meeting this thing that is kind of the thing that's causing all the problems outside the therapy room. And it's finally come into a reenactment in the room and is being worked out. And that's why I think you would like dynamic.
Yeah. No, I think I would. And this is the stuff I think we capture it in films, like when people think of the therapist finally snapping and
like in Good Will Hunting.
giving the real truth to it. Yeah. Like Good Will Hunting, Robin Williams is demonstrating the I thou relationship when he goes, you know what? You might have memorized every book in the world, but you don't know what the inside of the Sistine Chapel smells like. You know why? Because you ain't got experience, kid. Like that. That's like the second when those two connect, you know? So we're going to talk a little bit more about like how to engage in these relationships in the Patreon section. We're actually going to watch the Eli Manning or the Peyton Manning of humanistic psychotherapy and building a relationship with the patient, Carl Rogers himself.
Love that guy.
5-minute interview, and then we'll kind of react to it and talk about it. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go over to the Patreon. Other than that,
will solve your loneliness for the low cost of $8.
It's a latte, Patreon. People. Don't worry about it.
Or you can ask us for it in the Spotify comments, which we always.
I live for the Spotify comments. Okay, off to the Patreon section. You
can catch the next part of this on Patreon.
It's patreon.com/howtobepatientpod. And you guys missed out on a really interesting Carl Rogers discussion. Feel free to check out our other page there. Yeah. I feel so much less isolated. That's incredible. Anyways, y'all, thank you so much for listening. Thanks
I have
for all
some
the
comments
really
for us for
kind comments. Okay,
did you pick
Margaret,
one? Did you pick one also?
No, I want to hear it from you first.
So I just want to take you guys to the Spotify comment section, which is our beloved. It's mostly, honestly, you guys, it's because I didn't know that this existed before we had the podcast, that you could comment in, I think, only on podcast episodes. And I just want to look at the one from the most recent episode, which was Amin's episode. I did comment and said, I was in fact on island time. And then someone said, Elliot Houston said, love how you shared your reflection with this school disciplinary action. You're going to build such great rapport with your patients. Last year being the 6-7 really helped me connect with the littles and create such a laid-back environment for them, and they are engaging with healthcare workers. Amino from the episode said fire emoji. Michael Wilson said great episode. Josh Simpo said W episode. So we are in there, and we appreciate you guys being in there. Honestly, every time I check it on like Tuesday or Monday at like afternoon, I get a kick out of going in there and just commenting so much.
Of all the platforms, we just became simps for the Spotify comment section.
It's like when you realize you could like message your friend through a Google Doc back in the day and be like, we're commenting on this Google Doc.
So
okay, now we're serious.
But back to your comments, where you can leave them on Spotify. Tell us how the show is. If you're enjoying this series, this is part 3 of 4, so we have our closer coming up soon. I've been contemplating bringing a guest for the last one, but we'll kind of see how it works out for episode 4 of Existential Psychotherapy. Meaninglessness Strikes Back, or whatever we are going to call it. You can chat with us on Instagram and TikTok at Human Content Pods. I'm at It's Presro on Instagram and YouTube. Margaret's at Bad Art Every Day. And you can also find us at How to Be Patient Pod on Instagram.
We're there, guys.
Mutual Neopet. We're approaching 4,000 followers. If you want to be 4,002, you know where to go.
Get involved.
You can always find full video episodes on YouTube and Spotify. We're also going to be on a new platform for MedEd coming soon. Possibly. We will announce that later. We're your hosts, Preston Roche and Margaret Duncan. Our executive producers are me, Preston Roche, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Our editor and engineer is Jason Bortizo. Our music is by Omer Benz V. To learn about our program disclaimer and ethics policy, submission verification, licensing terms, and our HIPAA release terms, go to howtobepatientpod.com or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns. How to Be Patient is a human content production. thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.